Oh, crikey, 1987 that would have been. I moved to Canberra, and I had a friend of a friend I could ring up in Canberra, because Canberra was only a country town. And I phoned up this friend of a friend and introduced myself and said, can we meet for a beer because I don't know anybody in Canberra? And he said, yeah, anytime except Friday, because Fridays are Skeptics. And I've been looking for the Skeptics for 3 or 4 years.
But you knew of them since?
I knew of them since I was in Britain, which was 3 years before.
Huh.
I'd heard of them, and I couldn't find them. And this was before the internet. That they weren't in the telephone directory. They didn't advertise the meetings. It was hard to find things in those days.
Yeah.
It's easier now. But yeah, so on Friday I went to see him, and we went along to the Skeptics meeting in Canberra, and that's when I got involved.
Who was there? Do you remember?
Don Laycock, who was a famous old linguist. William Gray, who was an academic, went to Armidale University. Colin Groves, who was a professor of evolution. Julie McCowan Benson, who's the big cheese in ACT politics now. Quite a few august people.
So was it a committee meeting you went to, or what was it?
Well, it turns out it was. There were like 15 of them, and the way they did it, all 15 had some kind of job or other, and I was made assistant treasurer.
Right, on the spot?
On the spot, yeah. I was made assistant treasurer, and that gave me a post on the committee. But as assistant treasurer, I set up the mailbox for Canberra Skeptics, which is PO Box 555 Woden, and they're still using that box.
So how long were you involved with them?
Well, I lived in Canberra 2 years, and I was involved with them all that time. And I came back to Melbourne, and there was a group already going in Melbourne that I was introduced to, and I got on the committee of that straight away. I've seen 7 or 8 sets of people come and go, appear, rise to be president, and then disappear again.
Yes,
I've seen 7 or 8 people do that in a way.
And what was happening in the early days of the Melbourne Skeptic? Well, when you originally joined that committee, what were the activities?
Flying saucers and astrology, trying to get onto the media. They would, anytime somebody saw a UFO, to get these UFO people on the television, and they wanted somebody who could give balance to it. And there were a lot of psychics at the time. There was Ramtha, one called Marfu, who came out here in 1990, and people fell for these people on a big scale. There was no organised opposition to it, so the best they could do was get a skeptic out, and you could get on telly and say, well, I think it's all a fake, and you come across as a miserable party pooper against all these people who all loved each other and were having lots of fun. They were getting exploited, but they were something you could belong to, and those charlatans, basically, they did offer something. You could latch onto it and follow it, and this bloke appears as just a party pooper and saying, oh, it's all nothing.
So this was the late 80s?
Yeah, 89, 90.
In those days, when you were in Melbourne, just joining the Melbourne committee, was that before there was this national committee structure?
Yeah, there never was a national committee.
I don't think so, no.
I was involved in all that. I mean, the Skeptics began in Melbourne. Ian Bryce and Peter Hogan and some people were in Melbourne, and Ian Bryce moved to Sydney. And about that time, Barry Williams was already there in Sydney. And about that time, it's before my time, but about then, the Skeptics moved to Sydney. And it was a Sydney show with Melbourne as a sort of one of several offshoot groups in various states. And the main committee would send us $5 a year per member to run our affairs. We had a big bust-up about money. We didn't have any money at the time, or not much, and they mismanaged the money somehow, or the money ran out, and they told us one year, well, you won't be getting any money at all. And at about this time, we had some fairly feisty people in Melbourne, notably Adam Joseph, who was very good at organising, but you pay a price for that in the end.
And he had a radio show.
Yeah, I'll come to that. It's brilliant. And we had a committee of about 12 in Melbourne who were all very good, all hard-working, gutsy skeptics. And Sydney had very few people. It was all old men. And we were thinking, well, we'll take it over. We'll get hold of the mailing list. We'll well, we could do the mailing list better than Barry was doing it. He was making mistakes, and we'd manage the finances better, and we have better people, and we have better media contacts than Sydney had, and why can't we run it? And Sydney sort of began to close in on themselves. And this mighty row erupted between Melbourne and Sydney.
This was in the early 90s?
Yeah, 93, 94 this was. We had a very successful convention in 1993 with James Randi. We brought him out here to Melbourne. It was a huge success. People are still talking about it. 23 years later, they're still talking about, 25 years later, still talking about that time I saw Randy and so on. It was a big success, and Sydney had a convention the next year, which was a complete flop. And we were thinking, well, this is, why can't we just do it? It was looking a lot of acrimony between Melbourne and Sydney, but and there was no communication. It was before the internet, as I say, and only a few people knew one another. Peter Hogan knew Ian Bryce, Peter in Melbourne, Ian in Sydney. I could say I knew Barry Williams. I'd met him a couple of times. Stephen Basser in Melbourne knew Richard Gordon in Sydney, both medical doctors. And from these rather tenuous personal connections, we could find out that actually Adam was trying to take it all over himself, and we didn't really have a case for taking it over. And it sort of began to fall apart. Sydney was long-term stable. Had been going for 10 years, and one by one we all sort of left the idea alone of it all moving to Melbourne.
Adam Joseph was keen on this happening.
Very keen on this happening. And in the middle of all this, Stanley David Wally dropped dead and bequeathed to us $1 million in cash. Before we'd had $2,000 in the bank, and the finances were dubious. The cost of printing and mailing the magazine. But suddenly we had piles of money, and the way to destroy an organisation is to give it a large amount of money, and a fight will break out, sure as hell, and they'll all destroy each other. So suddenly it became a bid for all this money, and the money was legally held by Australian Skeptics Inc., which is 4 individuals, all of whom lived in Sydney. Okay, and Adam was saying, well, they'll just pocket the money, which in fact they legally could. It was left with no strings attached. At about that time, a washing powder company came to Barry Williams and said, we'll give you $30,000 to say that our washing powder washes shirts whiter than their washing powder, and he'll be on telly with Barry Williams, Australian Skeptics. Oh, this shirt washes whiter. And we had various ideas about should he accept this or not. Should he accept it and give the money to the Skeptics? And they said, no, it's payable to you. And I said, you should accept it and keep the money. You've worked for the Skeptics hard. This is one of the perks. And in the end, he decided not to do it at all. I thought, this are not the actions of a man who's trying to steal $1 million when he's given $30,000 and turns it down on some thin moral pretext.
And you stuck with the committee, in the Victorian committee, in the years following that?
Oh, yeah. Adam kept saying, well, Steve Roberts will go. You watch him leave, he'll be off straight away after I've gone, he'll go. But, hey, I'm still here. Kathy Butler bailed it out. We made her president. And she was very sensible and very good. I think having a female, there's a lot of testosterone flying around the room. Having a female president was very good, and she was good. She was well organised, and I'm very proud of her.
Now, when was the first time you met people like Barry Williams and the New South Wales Committee?
I went to the Gish-Plimer debate in 1988. I was there. Not only that, I sat next to Plimer's wife. It was a big hall this was in March 1988. And we sent a carload from Canberra. I drove it, I remember that. And we had Judy McCarran Benson and William Gray, I think, came to that. And there's this big hall full of creationists, and not many skeptics were in there. There might have been 40 skeptics and 600 creationists. And you don't know who you're sitting next to. So I sat next to a woman, and we heard the speeches for the first half, and I didn't know who she was, and she didn't know who I was. But it turns out she was Plimer's wife. She sent me down with a box of orange juice to give to him. And then I realised she's actually not one of the creationists, and we began to get on fairly well. The debate was the stuff of legend.
Yeah.
He accused Gish of being Satan to his face, and it went downhill from there. It was more like a massacre than a debate in both directions.
So, but New South Wales Committee's Skeptics were there.
Yeah. Tim Mendham was there. Jeffrey Birchfield interviewed me for the science program for Quantum. Jeffrey Birchfield was in the audience, and he interviewed me, but I stuttered, so I didn't use that bit. It was well adjudicated. At least it didn't descend into a punch up, but the verbal equivalent was there. But again, the Skeptics came off as wretched party poopers and miserable atheists compared to a hall full of people who agreed with each other, who, could see the light.
Now, what has your involvement with the magazine been over the years?
I wrote a couple of articles for it. That was back in the 1980s. I wrote one or two articles of psychics I'd been to the sessions of, and I wrote up the Gish-Plimer debate, and I made a mistake in it, which the creationists picked up on. But that sort of doomed me forever in their eyes. But I made a slight mistake in that, and I wrote a couple of articles for the magazine. And then I tried to proofread it. Tim Mendham was editing it then, and there were spelling mistakes in it, and it was looking rather shonky, quite honestly. If you look at the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower, if you look at that, or say New Scientist or Scientific American, we should be putting out something of that calibre, at least properly spelt and nicely laid out with pictures in it. And I tried to be the proofreader of it. I tried to say, well, I want to proofread the articles before they get published. And the editor at the time, who shall remain nameless, but his name rhymes with Barry Williams, said, no, there's no need to proofread my stuff. It's so good, there's no need to proofread it. And there's a big ding-dong about this. Well, you can't do it in time. Well, I fucking can, And I did say, I promised in writing, I said, if you send me stuff to proofread, I will return it within 24 hours, and I will pay the Skeptics $1 for every mistake that I've missed. Okay, and I've still got my $1. And I began to do this, and it was clumsy. We're doing it by fax. That's what they had in those days. You get this 30-page fax, and I'd write on it, or write an email before email. I'd write on the fax and send it back. Then we had email, and I'd list all the mistakes by email, and the mistakes, there might be 40 or 50 things worth correcting, or some howling logical mistakes. Somebody would say something in an article that is just way out of line, and you have to, the editor should spot it, but the editor's a hard-working man, but it got on. I've been proofreading the magazine ever since.
You're still proofreading?
Still am, yeah. Still do it, all of it. And as you know, Richard, we edited one issue in 2009. Mm-hmm. We lost the editor, and we stepped in haste and edited one issue, and we were bidding to be the editor permanently. There was a committee of us, me and you and some others, but Tim Mendham, who's been out in the woods all this time, he reappeared and said, well, I could do it, and I was very glad about that, because he's made a very good job, and he could do it far better than we could ever have done it, and he's still in there, And I proofread all the stuff, and me and Tim get on absolutely famously over this. He sends me stuff, I flick it back, and there's repartee between us, and it's a great friendship, and I'm very happy to do all that. So I don't really write for it, but I do read everything before it's published and check for mistakes and things.
You ended up also getting on the media at that time for UFOs and things like that. Yeah,
and these psychics. We had a successful one. There was somebody called Marfu who, like Ramtha, like a poor man's Ramtha, and this woman appeared. Penny Torres was her name. That's right. She was a housewife, and she turned into Marfu and dispensed wisdom. And she was on TV with Barry Williams. Made a lot of pompous platitudes, waffle, and Barry would just say, yeah, that's pretty good, It'd all fall flat. And we were famous. We had the whole front row of a TV audience. There was a whole front row of us Mark Plummer, he was active at the time. He went to America to work with Buffalo Skeptics, but he came back and was in Melbourne. He was actually fairly hard to get on with, fairly hard to work with. But he did set things up like this. And we had somebody who shouted at Martha, she said she was a soldier in ancient Rome. And he said, "Can you say something in Latin?" And she couldn't, He said, "Well, you were a soldier in ancient Rome, let's hear something in Latin." No, it went, "Oh, yeah, I could do this, but it's only language and waffle, but nothing in Latin."
Do you remember what TV show it was where you had the front row?
They were doing shows, Richard Carlton was on it.
60 Minutes, was it?
It might have been that, or Carlton's own programme or something. There were such programmes common.
Yeah.
We had one with UFOs, Colin Kay was on that, and he again came across as the sole skeptic and only party pooper in a studio full of happy flying saucer believers.
Could that have been the Couchman program?
Couchman, it was Couchman, yeah. Couchman introduced it, and he wanted a controversy. He wanted somebody who said I can bend spoons and somebody who said no you can't, and let the two of them come together.
So you've got the reputation of being the Australian Skeptics UFO expert.
Yeah, other people claim that. How can somebody be an expert in something that's unknown? But yeah, I mean, I was a UFO believer when I was a kid. I set up on this. I thought there was something going on. I had a respect for books, and you can get UFO books. You could at the time, you certainly can now. And I thought if somebody's in a book, it's true, And I thought there was something happening. And if you don't chase up the legends too far, you can believe them. Now the problem was we had a group at my university that was studying this. We sort of got hold of all the UFO sightings that we got hold of the British archives of UFO sightings, and for a start, for 6 years of archives, there was about that much paper. And we said, "Well, where's the rest of it?" And I said, "Well, that's it. That's what there is." They thought this whole UFO story comes on 100 sightings, of which about 80 are clearly just garbage, fuzzy lights or a funny feeling or something, and some had some guts in them. But there were none of the famous sightings in there that came up later on.
So you had this interest long before you came to Australia?
Oh yeah, I was 15, and I thought there was something going on, so we thought we'd study it. We got together at uni, as I say, and the big mistake was we looked at the evidence. Firstly, wasn't much evidence, and secondly, what there was not very good. And we went to some UFO meetings of the UFO Research Association, and there's some strange people at these meetings, and we all became sceptical. We weren't to start with. They had a bloke who'd seen the Loch Ness Monster. He had a film of it. It's fairly plausible, this film, Tim Dinsdale. And we saw the film. It could be the Loch Ness Monster, but then a number of questions arise. Like what does it eat, and is there more than one? And why haven't we got other films, and and so on. But could this be something else? What is the object really? It turned out to be an otter, basically. Closer to the camera than you think. It was an otter. But yeah, we became sceptical. It was long before the skeptics were invented. So when I hear a UFO sighting, you think, well, is it more likely that there are aliens flying around the Earth doing things, or more like that somebody just misinterpreted what he saw? So the thing is, to be sceptical of UFOs, you have to learn all the stories. There was a sighting in Rendlesham Forest in 1980. You have to know what that was, and where it was, and what it was like, and what the explanation is. The wacko story of it, and the believer story, and the scientific fact of it. Jimmy Carter saw a UFO. This is true. There's an explanation which is not well known, but there is an explanation of what he saw. And you have to learn all that. And when you talk to these people, it's like talking to Gish about creationism. They say, "What about this one? And what about this?" And you have to know all these. And say, "Well, that was a hoaxer. That was somebody misidentifying. That was something. Oh, what about this one? Oh, I don't know about that one. Oh, you don't know about that one. Oh, well, now I've got the upper edge, you say. Oh, this is proof that there's UFOs, and you don't know, and you get sunk. So you have to learn all this arbitrary stuff. That's how I became the UFO expert.
So not long after you joined the Australian Skeptics in Canberra, then Melbourne, you were called upon by the Skeptics to represent them when the media came calling.
Other people did as well. Colin Kay, the professor of astronomy, he was active in that. William Gray could handle it. Barry Williams could handle it.
Yeah.
It depends which town you're in. And Barry's in Sydney. Colin Kay was in Newcastle. I was in Melbourne. I got into telly a couple of times and was called up a couple of times, or eventually got passed to me. And UFO stories now are just, you can interpret each one as they come in.
They don't come in often.
Very, very rarely indeed now, because people have mobile phones with cameras in them, or mobile phones, and that just killed it.
Now, the other day you and I were in the library here in Melbourne, and we were going through old issues of a newspaper called The Truth, or the Melbourne Truth?
The Melbourne Truth, yeah.
And which was really a trashy magazine for horse racing and
pornography and what's it called? Hysterical news,
Hysterical news.
Aliens ate my baby.
That sort of stuff. Well, not quite. We say pornography, but they had topless models in it and things like that.
Yeah.
But it was a popular newspaper at the time, and you were called in because there was a crop circle. What can you tell me about that story?
All right. There was a fad for crop circles in Britain, summer of 1989. And a few before that, not many, but it got bigger and bigger in the summer. And 1990 it was huge, and it got even huger. Only in Wiltshire in Britain, which is hilly and hot and dry and has crops, which in August, which is the height of the summer, the crop's standing and you can bend the stalks over easily and make a pattern in it, and then go up a hill nearby and look at it, or film it. And these circles were appearing left, right and centre. The farmer gets apoplectic, but until he realises he can put up a sign that says "See the crop circle, £5," and he gets more money than the crop is worth. It saves him having to harvest it. There were crop circle fans. Colin Andrews, noticeably, who's still out there, still trying to believe in them. And eventually, 2 old men confessed to forging most of them, and other people copied. Yeah. There's at least 20 groups in Britain now, I think, making crop circles. They meet in the same pub, probably a fight starts, and one appeared in Australia. I mean, we all like our own story, so
this is 1989.
1989,
One crop circle appeared. Where was that?
It was in a town in the Mallee in Western Victoria. Actually, there were 5 circles that appeared. The article said 5 had appeared. There was a picture of the farmer standing in one of them, which was about the size of half the size of this room, about 4 metres across.
4 metres, 10 feet across.
Yes, right. Yeah, standing in that, and it's looking like, I don't know, it could have just arisen from somebody doing a U-turn with a 4-wheeled quad bike or something, or somebody just made it for a laugh.
So it was just a circle, not complex or anything.
No, just a circle.
Just a circle.
And the article said there were 5. And also the farmer had seen a bright yellow light, and also water had gone missing from the farmer's water tank. This turned out to be 2 years before, and the yellow light was 6 weeks later, and water goes missing. I thought that tank was full. Well, it's empty now. Maybe somebody left the tap on and didn't fess up to it. This happens a lot on farms, but you make an article out of it. And I saw this in The Truth, or it was brought to my attention, and I rang them up and said, well, this is just nothing to shout about, really. There's no evidence except the circle that it was a UFO, not UFO lands on farm as the headline. I said,
because when you say you saw it in The Truth, it was on the front page.
Yeah, all over the front page.
Yeah, so it caught your attention.
Yeah, and I said, well, there's no evidence it was a UFO. It could just be somebody else.
You contacted the reporter.
Yeah, John Pinckney, who was famous for digging up stories like this, and had just joined The Truth at the time. And they had articles say, well, what would Stephen Roberts know about it? You've never made a crop circle. And in fact, I have, but I didn't bother replying to all this. They said, well, I've seen it and you haven't. You've never made one, the way you say it could be done. Well, I have, But why argue, it sells newspapers. That came and went, that story. But I saw the farmer come to a convention of crop circle fans. There were 400 people in a room. Colin Andrews giving a talk, and the farmer, who's a female, was brought in after everyone was seated. The farmer who'd been flown down from the Mallee to Melbourne and wined and dined came in very attractively coiffed and made up and wearing a fur coat, and you could sense the reverence in the room as if the Queen of England had come in, which was a similar experience. And she was treated with enormous respect because she had this crop circle on her farm, you know. And I did say to her afterwards that if you like, I can give you the name and address of the man who made your crop circle. She said, no, I'd rather not find that out, actually. I like things the way they are, thank you. I like the fur coat and the front seat, you know.
So that was 1989.
Yeah.
But UFOs were still popular for a while, but when do you think did you notice the decline in the popularity in reporting? Does it really tie in that closely with mobile phones?
Yeah. 1993 onwards, there were mobile phones available to the common man. There were phones in cars in 1990. The phone was so big you could only imagine it in a car. And we had one at work. It was a heavy briefcase, 20 kilograms, with a phone in it. And in 1993, there began to be phones you could actually carry on your person. Okay, and there was an advert for it by Telstra. So it showed somebody in a field with a UFO, and he had a phone, and they were saying, "Quick, tell somebody."
Yeah.
And that's what the phenomenon just died overnight, you know, because suddenly people had these phones. They couldn't take pictures, but you could ring somebody up and say, you know, "Mum, there's a UFO above my head now," or whatever. "Come here, quick," or something. And then, of course, later they had cameras in the phone, so now everybody has a camera.
Yeah.
And UFOs have just died out.
I mean, you're not contacted anymore by media about UFOs, are you?
I am, but there's no UFOs. I mean, somebody sets fire to a garbage bag. You take the garbage sack and hold it upside down and set fire to the bottom. It'll fill with hot air and float off. There's your UFO. It gets in the media.
No, well, the one I remember you did comment on was, we're talking 10, 12 years ago, was the Beveridge UFO.
Yeah.
Now, just for the sake of reminding people, what was that story?
That was in January 2004. January, anyway, which is the height of summer down here. And one of the council engineers has to go out every year and photograph the level crossing working. Okay, they take a film when the train comes, showing the booms come up and down, showing all the lights flashing, and they then have a record that the crossing was working on that day. And every year he has to go and film the level crossing boom working, and there he is filming his boom going up and down, and woo, 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 woo. Across goes this UFO, and
that was a still picture, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a JPEG.
Yeah,
he took
JPEG,
and I have the original picture. So suddenly, I have the original seminal evidence myself. You know, I have the JPEG picture, and that's all there is. You know, because normally you get a copy of a copy of a copy, and you think, well, the original is going to be better. But now I've actually got the original, and there is a black object flying with a little white tail.
Yeah.
Now, if you go there at the height of the summer and you interview people, they're always doing that.
Shooing the flies away.
Flies everywhere.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
And lo and behold, a fly goes in front of the camera, and that's why the UFO's out of focus and the level crossing's in focus, and the size all matches up, and everything's right for a fly about 3 feet from the lens going across. And of course, your face is behind the camera, so you actually wouldn't see it. You wouldn't see the fly.
Well, the guy said at the time he didn't see anything in the sky, but when he looked at the photograph, there it was.
That's right, only at the photo. So then what is the story? What's the backstory of the sighting? You know, for every UFO picture, you have this UFO picture, and there's got to be a story. You say, well, did you see it? Did you hear a noise? Were other people there? What were you doing? Why were you taking photographs in the sky? You know, did you have to go and get the camera? What is the story? You know? It's kind of odd that just when you've got the camera ready and you're pointing it at the sky, a UFO comes across. You know.
It was popular. It made the news. It made the TV.
It filled a spot on the news. Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's man bites dog, or latest scam with Australian cricketer polishes cricket ball.
That's right.
You need short of news. Look, UFOs are cute, and no one's ever been harmed by a UFO. I mean, abductees say they have, but no one's been killed by a UFO. Nobody's flown an aeroplane into a skyscraper because of UFOs.
Yeah. Now, they're a great story. It's one of the reasons that I got involved, because I love that sort of stuff.
Yeah. That's all very bucolic. Unfortunately, skepticism has become nasty in later years because there's nastier targets than flying saucers and astrologers, but I rather miss those days, when that was the only bad news there was.
Now let's think about some of the adventures. How many water divining tests were you involved with? Were you involved with the original MITA one?
No, yes, the original one I was. The original was in 1980. Dick Smith brought Randy out here. That's how the Skeptics were formed. They thought, let's get some diviners and test them. They had this big meeting, and Australian Skeptics were formed from that meeting. Dick Smith and Randy and a couple of other people, put money up and formed this thing. And I think there was a couple of lesser divining competitions after that. They're hard to arrange. You can do it in different ways. I mean, some diviners say, well, I can only divine running water. So you have to provide running water. That's hard to run 10 pipes under a field, and it costs money. Or I can only divine static water. I can't do water in plastic, or there's always some excuse. The way around that is to say, well, there's $100,000 if you can. And suddenly maybe I could do water in plastic. Let's have a shot. So I was involved in the first MITA test in 2001 or 2002. 2001. It was 2001. You were at the second one. You filmed it, okay, and that's the seminal film. I was there in the first one, and that was interesting to work on that. Were
you at the one I filmed?
No.
I was at the next one.
They had those two, then a third one in 2013. I was at that. The 2001 one, I devised the protocol, and we had 20 milk cartons buried, 2-litre milk cartons, and some had sand in and some had water in. And they were placed on the surface, and placed in a paper bag and placed on the surface. That's it. And you couldn't see what was in them. And they'd hover over each one. Nobody tried to cheat. And if you could kick the damn thing, you could see immediately if it was water or sand, for example. Or I was afraid there might be condensation. If the weather changed, the water would make condensation on the bag, and you'd see it. But nobody tried to cheat, and the results came in with the expected bell curve, the flat curve like that. And of course, the guy who was down there on the bell curve said, "Oh, well, I'm better than the others." And we had the unfortunate result that the leading, you can't say the leading contender, it was the least incompetent contender who got 14 out of 20 right, which you will get if you do 100 people. It was a female, and we turned her into a water diviner. She wasn't aware she could do it, but she went and got lessons and came back the next year and did very badly, unfortunately. But she thought she had it from that. Oh dear. These are all bush people, farmers and hydraulic engineers and well borers, who do it for a living. We came back for a second one with you filming it. That was a hoot. And then we did a third one 10 years later, and I devised the protocol for that, which was sort of something you can actually do in a field and that is valid and it works, and it was quite hard to do. But you basically have a tent where the bottles go in and they come out again in bags, and we know at that point, the people in the tent know what's in each bag, but nobody else knows. Then you've got to stop them signalling. You could game the whole thing easily. If I'm in the tent and I put the things in the bags and I signal, I'm at the back. It's $100,000. And worse than that, like if you run electrical wires down your trousers and pulse signals out of them, you can detect if there's a conducting body nearby or not. So you just stand in front of your water sample and you can tell if it's water or conducting or not, without any visible cheating except the wires down the trousers. $100,000, so we did that, and again the results came in flat. There's a good story there actually. One guy got 12 out of 20, which is sort of not at all significant when you test 50 people. And he was telling his wife and kids, "Oh, I'm pretty good. I got 12 out of 20. I always thought I was good at divining, and I was standing nearby, and I had the bell chart with me, and said, well, actually, the statistics, you're there here's your bell curve, and you're there, and you'd be over here if you were special, 12 or 20 is not that special." And he had no defence. He said, well, actually, I don't mind not being special. And they all empathised with that. I said to him, actually, if you were special, your life would be miserable. You know, I mean, I would take you away from here. I'd give you more than $100,000. You know, I would take you away with me, and I would work you finding oil and minerals and stuff, and your life would be miserable. And then there'd be, why can't you find it? Why have you stuffed up this time? You'd be in trouble, and your life would not be pleasant if you were special. You know, so you don't want to be special.